Ah, the 80s. A decade of big hair, big tunes, and even bigger movies. And, as if that wasn't enough, video games were about to get really, really good. No longer content with simple arcade shooters and overwrought adventure titles, companies like Sega, Capcom, and Nintendo were about to start making their mark in a formative golden age for console and arcade gaming. From the ashes of the video game crash would rise an entertainment behemoth that nobody could have predicted. In the last episode, we explored how games based on movies were beginning to establish themselves with mixed success. But in this generation, a lot of game publishers would begin to leap at the opportunity to get in on some of that moviegoer money. Indeed, some of the most iconic and beloved movies of all time would release in the years from 1983 to 1989, and most of them had a video game version of some kind releasing right alongside them. So, who was making these games? How well did they translate from their source material? Are any of them worth playing today? Join me once again as we answer all these questions and more, and continue to dive into the history of movie-licensed games. Where we were able to take a fairly holistic approach to our look at movie adaptations last time, the sheer number of them that released from here on out means that I'm gonna have to be a little more selective with what I highlight, or we'll be here for hours. So, where should we start? Well, since we ended in 1983 last time, why don't we take a look at what 1984 had to offer? Oddly, 1984 was something of a quiet year, not just for movie-adapted games, but games as a whole. I don't think the industry had quite recovered from the crash yet, and the NES wouldn't be coming out in the West for another year, so it's pretty slim pickings. That doesn't mean there weren't any movie-licensed games whatsoever, though. Let's see what we've got. Okay, think of an 80s movie. Any 80s movie. I'll bet a good chunk of you pictured this logo in your head. 1984's Ghostbusters is without a doubt one of the most beloved blockbusters of the decade, if not of all time. Between its catchy theme song, great comedic performances, and impressive effects, the film would go on to be a major success for production company Columbia Studios. Quick to recognise the film's box office potential, Activision acquired the licensing rights to make a game based on the film while it was still in production. The project was given to legendary game designer David Crane, who worked on these Atari 2600 classics. To get the game out in time, Crane and his team were only given 6 weeks to complete the game, instead of the usual 9 months. Sound familiar? Don't worry though, we wouldn't see another ET situation. Crane was already working on a game called Car Wars, and was more or less given carte blanche to make whatever Ghostbusters game he saw fit. So, Car Wars was retooled as Ghostbusters. After a still fairly grueling 6 weeks, the game released for the Commodore 64 in October of 1984, while excitement for the film was still high. As a game, it's actually very fun and surprisingly deep. You get your own team of Ghostbusters, and you have a set budget to choose which parts to equip your ghostbusting vehicle with. Then, it's a matter of driving around the city, busting ghosts, and making sure things don't get too spooky. The game sold well, and would go on to be ported to just about every console from the area that you could think of. The NES version, released all the way in 1988, and developed by a different company, is probably best known for its poorly translated end screen. Congratulations, indeed. Overall though, Ghostbusters is a great little adaptation, especially for its time. There's Stay Puft, some cool digitized voices, and speaking of voices actually, you may remember in the last episode I said I had a soft spot for video game renditions of movie themes. Well, yep, that's a little bouncing karaoke ball. Not only that, hitting spacebar gives you this. Top marks, Ghostbusters.
Does it concern you that we're now kind of repackaging movies? I mean, has the game business now gotten to the movie business and the pop music business?
Not in my opinion. It's been attempted many times before to make games out of movies and any kind of merchandising you can name. It's a game that people have told me they would enjoy playing whether there was a Ghostbusters name on it or not.
David Lightman was a master at computer games.
War Games was a movie that combined the world of computer gaming with a thrilling story of Cold War-era intrigue. Of course, with the virtual world forming a central part of the movie's plot, there was a game released to coincide with it. Developed by Coleco and released rather unimaginatively for the ColecoVision, this game adapts the film's memorable NORAD scene into a fairly dry yet fairly complex strategy title. I have never been super into strategy games, so I couldn't tell you if this is a good one or a bad one. I think if you like the movie, you'll at least get a kick out of trying your hand at defending the US from nuclear destruction via the medium of old computer software. What else have we got from 84? Oh, there's another Alien game. This one came out on the holy trinity of 80s home PCs, the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64, and the Amstrad CPC. This one's another strategy game. At least it certainly looks and feels much more like Alien than the 2600 attempt. You're tasked with moving the crew members of the Nostromo around as they try to find the ever-lurking xenomorph. All of the crew members have emotional statuses that change based on their situation, and the alien gradually matures over time. It's pretty in-depth, and there are even little animations featuring the alien. I'm, not sure what it's doing here, mind you. There will certainly be better games based on this franchise, but there's something to be said for the tension and simplicity in this effort from Concept Software. You could even make the case for this game being an early example of a true survival horror game. To close out 1984, we'll take another dip into the trusty Star Wars universe. We've already skipped a few Star Wars games, and will continue to do so since there are so many Star Wars games that you could make a whole video series about just those. But I'll keep trying to cover what I consider to be the more notable releases in this series. Here's the second arcade Star Wars game made by Atari, Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi eschews the original game's vector graphics in favour of Zaxxon-style isometric shooting gameplay, seeing you piloting a variety of iconic Star Wars vehicles across various scenes from the film. It's fun, but I definitely prefer the original vector game. A few sources I can find seem to suggest that there was a planned ET arcade game that was to use the same cabinet architecture as this Return of the Jedi game, but you probably don't need my help guessing why that didn't see the light of day. I know what you're thinking, they've skipped a film. Where's Empire Strikes Back? Well, Empire Strikes Back, objectively the best Star Wars movie, did get an arcade game, but it wouldn't release until 1985. Not one to reinvent the wheel again, Empire is a conversion kit for the original 1983 Star Wars game, and as such it plays very similarly to that one, only this time you're faced with two new scenarios. The first plays out on Hoth in Snowspeeders, and in the second, you play Han Solo as he tries to outrun the Empire. Empire Strikes Back is definitely worth a play if you enjoyed the 1983 game. It's largely more of the same, but the graphics are a little more detailed and there's some nice gameplay variety on offer here.
The Force is with you. He could destroy us. He will join us or die.
Alright, now we're getting somewhere. In 1985 we'd see the US release of the Nintendo Entertainment System. This console will go on to be home to some of the most popular classic video games of all time, and is generally considered to be one of the key factors in the revival of the video games industry. Meanwhile, in the same year, media conglomerate MCA bought out toy company LJN, and soon after the company set their sights on the lucrative games industry. The relationship between LJN and Nintendo's debut home console would prove commercially successful, but LJN's suite of movie licensed titles would go down in history as some of the worst the console had to offer. Why don't we take a look at some of what the guys at LJN had in store? Were they really that bad? There's 1987's Karate Kid, which was published by LJN and developed by Atlus? Yep, that Atlus. After developing the first game in the Megami Tensei series, the then budding Japanese development team were subcontracted to develop a game based on the first and second films in the American martial arts adventure franchise. It's fairly hard to find any information on the development of this game, or of any LJN game for that matter, but there is one pretty funny nugget of history I can find. In Atlus's next game, Erika Tosatoru no Yume Boken for the Famicom, you can find a secret message from a developer that plays music from Karate Kid, with a message that roughly translates to, "Hey, what nostalgic music, it reminds me of those good old days. All guys were working as professionals." Before going on to reveal some, less than savoury things about the developer's co-workers. I won't get too deep into exactly what the whole message says, but let's just say it's a lot. Needless to say though, it sounds like at least the development of Karate Kid went smoothly, so how did the game turn out? If you're familiar with the Angry Video Game Nerd or countless other retro gaming YouTubers, you're probably no stranger to the popular opinion that LJN's games aren't exactly classics. As for Karate Kid specifically, it's overly difficult and it's got platforming sections that make controlling Daniel-san feel unintuitive at best and downright frustrating at worst. But it's certainly not the worst thing on the NES, not even the worst LJN game, and the music is pretty good, but overall, maybe just play Kung Fu instead. Also in 1987, LJN would release the first official Jaws game, emphasis on official. This one's made by Wonder Boy devs Westone. Funnily enough, chunks of this game actually resemble Atari's Shark Jaws pretty closely. Again, a lot of the gameplay sees you as a diver collecting various oceanic goodies and avoiding the titular great white. This time around, however, gamers after the Jaws experience can expect a little more depth. You sail around in a little boat on the hunt for Jaws, and you get these JRPG-esque random encounters where you'll do the aforementioned diving gameplay. Most of this game revolves around collecting shells so that you can buy enough power to beat Jaws. None of it is all that challenging or intuitive, and the random encounters can become a little tiresome. Also, this game seems to not actually be an adaptation of Steven Spielberg's Jaws, but the more era-appropriate Jaws the Revenge from 1987. This time it's personal. Still, it's not the worst thing ever. I can't stay mad at that stupid shark face. By 1989, LJN were losing money and were trying to push out as many movie tie-ins as possible. In 1 year, we'd see LJN release a trio of games adapted from 80s film favourites including Friday the 13th, Back to the Future, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. None of them are great, but I'd say Back to the Future is the worst of the bunch. I love Back to the Future, but this game adaptation seems to be a collection of barely playable minigames whose relation to the actual film is tangential at best. I mean, who can forget all the evil hula dancing girls from Back to the Future? The music interpolates the song The Power of Love from the movie, which is almost kind of endearing until you realise it plays on loop for the entirety of the game. Honestly, I'd sooner play E.T. Maybe not actually. As for Friday the 13th, it's kinda interesting in its own right, if only for the fact that it seems to have developed something of a cult following. Atlus also developed this game, and you can certainly see some of that early JRPG DNA in this title, especially in these sections which resemble the dungeon crawling of the Megami Tensei series. The game, more specifically the odd blue and pink colour palette they chose for Jason Voorhees, seems to have established itself as part of the Friday the 13th canon, with the Dayglow coloured killer receiving both an official action figure and a selectable costume in the 2017 Friday the 13th game. Honestly, when it comes to LJN, what's more interesting to me than the games themselves are the teams behind them. Beyond Atlus and Westone, Roger Rabbit was developed by Rare, who had already established themselves with a suite of fun and well-received NES games. People often mock LJN for making the worst games of all time, but in reality, LJN never made a single game. Many of them were made by pretty respected developers, and a few of them, but certainly not all, are at least reasonably enjoyable to play. There's this reputation around LJN's games specifically, but really, plenty of other publishers were doing the exact same thing around this time. Okay, all LJN'd out, I know I am. We'll be looking more into their catalogue as we step into the 90s, but for now, let's close out the 80s with two very cool and very different games. First of all, we'll be taking a look at our first Japan-exclusive game. In January 1989, Sweet Home, a low-budget horror film directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa, released in Japan. Before the film released, Capcom legend Tokuro Fujiwara was tasked with the creation of a game adaptation for Nintendo's Famicom console, which is just the Japanese version of the NES. He was invited to the film's set to get some ideas for objects and environments in the game, and afterwards he set to work. What resulted was Sweet Home for the Famicom, released in December of the same year. This game is awesome. It's intense, spooky, and probably the first game that you could truly, definitively consider a survival horror game. You play a group of filmmakers exploring an old abandoned mansion in search of some rare paintings. There's turn-based battles, cool Metroidvania-esque world unlocking, and some really great pixel art. Not to mention, this game's atmosphere and scares are genuinely impactful and make exploring the mansion feel like a truly oppressive experience, in a good way. Sweet Home would go on to be the progenitor of the beloved Resident Evil series, and no doubt inspired countless other well-known games with the varied and interesting ideas it brought to the table. I definitely recommend checking it out. Sadly, this game never got localized in the West, but there's a great fan translation that's fairly easy to come by if you know where to look.
Sweet Home The Famicom 心の力を私にください 心の力
Finally, let's round off the decade with a look at a great NES game based on one of my favourite superhero movies. Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie was twisted, gothic superhero fun, and would receive not one, but two video game adaptations, one by Ocean Software for home computers, and another by Sunsoft for the NES. We'll be talking about the NES version here. This wasn't Sunsoft's first try at adapting a movie into a video game. They had released a Platoon game a year prior, and their game Journey to Silius was originally planned to be a game based on Terminator, so this wasn't their first rodeo. 1989's Batman boasts great music, really impressive environment art, and some fun, if difficult, platformer gameplay that reminds me a little of Ninja Gaiden and the classic Castlevania games with how you can switch out your gadgets and such. It's really a great look into how far they were able to push the hardware of the NES in its later life, and a very solid addition to the NES library. I really love the pictures in the cutscenes. They're really moody and fit the tone of the film well. With the ups and downs of the 80s in the rear view and the technological leaps of the 90s just around the corner, things are about to step up once more in the world of gaming, and companies trying to adapt their film licenses would have to keep up. Join us next time as we take our first steps into the 90s, and see how movies were represented by the mega-powered 16-bit era of video games.